The Insta360 GO 3 is here, but for only an extra $70 US, you can pick up the X3, which is the flagship camera of the Insta360 lineup. So which camera should you buy? Today I'm going to compare these two cameras, and I ran a bunch of tests, and some of the results honestly really did surprise me. All right, so first of all, let's talk a bit about the image quality differences between these two cameras. And this is the area that honestly surprised me the most. Now, the X3 can shoot video in resolutions of up to 5.7K at 30 frames per second, while the GO 3 can only do 2.7K at 30 frames per second. So you might think straight away that the X3 will undoubtedly have the better looking footage, but I created a bit of a janky 2-camera rig and shot a bunch of test footage with these two cameras side by side, and the results were really interesting. Now I set both cameras on full auto, so the shots that you're seeing are the shots that you got out of the box, but the thing I noticed the most was that the GO 3 footage overall I thought was actually sharper and better exposed. And I think the main reason for this is because on the X3, that 5.7K is the full 360-degree view. So when I did zoom in on the shots to match the aspect ratio to the GO 3 footage, I naturally lost resolution and detail, which made the X3 footage overall kind of look grainier and just not as sharp clear. I even thought the colors on the GO 3 overall kind of looked nicer and more vibrant on the full auto settings. Like I said, the other thing I noticed was exposure. So I noticed highlights were being quite blown out on the X3 while they were being exposed fairly well on the GO 3. And again, I think the main reason for this is because the X3 has to expose for a full 360-degree environment, which makes perfect sense. Like the X3 is trying its best to expose for the whole environment, whereas with the GO 3, you can point your camera directly at something in shadow or something in bright light, and it knows, okay, I need to expose for this particular shot. Now with the X3, because you can switch it into single lens mode, which means it only films on one of the cameras in the dual camera setup. And when I had it in this mode, the exposure was really good and very similar to the GO 3, which again confirms the whole idea that when it's in the 360 mode, it's exposing for everything. Whereas when you put it in single lens mode, it knows where you're pointing the camera and what you're trying to expose, and therefore exposes it much more clearly. The other thing to point out with the X3 is that if you don't zoom in as far and you have it on a wider shot, which is basically what the X3 is designed for anyway, the footage is really clear and sharp. And this whole difference in how the two cameras actually shoot footage really plays directly into which one is my favorite, which I'll talk more about at the end. The GO 3 roughly weighs 131 grams in total. However, when you take it out of the action pod, the standalone camera is only 35.5 grams, which is super lightweight. On the other hand, the X3 is 180 grams, which is about 50 grams heavier than the GO 3. And I have noticed that when you've got them on a selfie stick, that extra 50 grams is actually noticeable. I don't think it means you'll be more fatigued at the end of the day after shooting with it, but it does feel just a little bit heavier. Now again, talking about the size, they're super portable and you can put them in heaps of places that you couldn't normally put regular cameras. However, like I said, because you can detach the GO 3 from the case, it really does open up heaps more possibilities of places that you can put the GO 3. You just can't put other cameras, even the X3. So that's one clear benefit for the GO 3. Now, talking a bit about the battery life of the two cameras, the GO 3 has a total capacity with the action pod of 1580 milliamp hours. And with the case, it'll run for about 3 hours, depending on the mode you're shooting in. Now, on the other hand, the X3 has a battery capacity of 1800 milliamp hours. However, the advertised runtime is about 1.5 hours, which is about half the time that the GO 3 is advertised to run for. And I think that's just due to the fact that there's kind of more going on with the X3 with the dual cameras and a bigger screen. So I think it's understandable. If battery life is something that's important to you, that is worth taking into account with these two cameras. However, one other thing you can take into account with the X3 is that you can quickly swap in and out batteries. So if you buy a second battery for the X3 and the first one runs out, you can just quickly swap in a new one and keep shooting. Whereas the GO 3 has no removable battery. Now, I just wanted to touch on a few other features that are kind of similar between the two cameras. First of all, they have very similar UIs, so you won't have any problems. If you've already used an Insta360 camera in the past, it's all very familiar and super easy to navigate. It's one of my favorite things about Insta360 cameras. This includes most of the same modes on both the cameras, such as video, photo, HDR photo, time-lapse, time shift, star lapse, interval, and loop recording. However, it's worth noting that the X3 has HDR video, which the GO 3 doesn't. And then X3 also has an image burst mode, which you can't find on the GO 3. Now, both cameras are waterproof out of the box. The X3 is rated to be waterproof to 10 meters. And then the GO 3 outside of the case is rated to go to 5 meters, with the case being just splash proof. So if you are planning on taking your camera underwater a lot, that's also something worth considering. Now, let's talk about the features features on these two cameras that are actually quite different. And this is kind of, to me, where the use case for you becomes a lot more obvious. Now let's talk about the most obvious thing, which is the lenses. So the X3 has the dual lens, which enables you to have that full 360-degree view. A huge benefit of having a 360 camera like this means that you don't have to worry about framing your shot while you're shooting. So if you shoot a lot of action stuff, like for example, I've done a lot of shooting with the X3 on my skateboards, I don't have to think about making sure that the camera is pointed directly in the right direction. I don't have to worry about framing. I just have to make sure I've got the camera roughly at the right height that I want it to be, and then I can just reframe it in post later. Now, of course, that could be considered a downside to the X3, that you do have to reframe. You have to spend a lot more time in post to make sure that the footage is actually facing what you want it to be looking at. Now, the Go 3, on the other hand, has a single wide angle lens, which is kind of the inverse in terms of benefits and downsides to the X3. So the big benefit of having the single lens is that it means there's less work to do in post because you've already shot what you're wanting to be looking at. It does also mean that the exposure will probably be better, like we talked about earlier. But the big downside to having the single lens is that you have to be really conscious about what you're actually shooting, what your framing is while you're filming with the Go 3. And this could be a big downside if you're shooting a lot of action footage, but you don't necessarily have the time or the headspace to be thinking about your framing all the time. Now, moving on to the storage options for these two cameras, the X3 has removable storage in the form of micro SD cards. So you can pretty much expand the memory on the X3 to as much as you want. Whereas the Go 3 has internal storage. So it's got three options. You've got a 32GB model, a 64GB, and a 120GB option. When it comes to selfie sticks, both of these cameras can be mounted easily to selfie sticks. However, a clear benefit of the X3 is the invisible selfie stick feature, which basically means that when you're shooting in 360 mode, any selfie stick that you're holding will be cropped out of the image and it looks like you're not even holding a selfie stick at all. However, with the Go 3, because it's got that single lens, if you are holding a selfie stick, it will be visible in your shots. Now, lastly, I just wanted to talk about the differences in mounting options. And this is another point that I found pretty interesting. The X3 has a 1/4 inch thread on the bottom of the camera, which means you can mount it to heaps of different camera accessories just straight out of the box. However, the Go 3 has a proprietary quick release system and it has no 1/4 inch on the actual camera itself. Now, the quick release plate that comes with the camera has the 1/4 inch, so then you can mount it onto all the same accessories and tripods and whatever you want as the X3. But I was thinking, if I ever do lose that quick release plate, or if I get it, leave it at home, then I'm kind of screwed. Although a big benefit of the Go 3 is that when you take it out of the case, it's actually magnetic. So if you've got magnetic surfaces to stick it on, then that can be pretty handy. You don't need any external accessories. That's how it also attaches to the pendant that you can buy to give you some really cool point of view footage. But I think that is worth keeping in mind. You do need that accessory to be able to mount the Go 3 to different 1/4 inch accessories, whereas the X3 can do that straight out of the box. So all that said, which camera is right for you? Which one do I recommend? And I think what it comes down to is what you're planning on using your action camera for. I think the X3 is better for people who are wanting to not have to worry about framing while they're filming. They just want to be able to shoot while they're in the moment, which is especially great for action footage because you can just focus on what you're doing and not have to worry about the camera so much. And the 360 ability just gives you so many options for reframing and creativity in post, which honestly I think makes it an incredible camera. Now, on the other hand, I think the Go 3 is really good for people who are wanting something that they can easily use hands-free, especially with something like the magnetic pendant or the clip for your hat. This is great if you don't want to have to be holding a selfie stick while you're shooting. And I think the other huge benefit to the Go 3 is if you want to get really unique angles or shots from places that you just couldn't normally get a camera. So in summary, I'd say the X3 is great for people who do a lot of action shooting. The Go 3 is great for people who do sort of more casual shooting with vlogs and time lapses and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, they're honestly two really great cameras that I love. And my personal favorite is probably the X3. And I think that's just because I love the ability to reframe and you can just get some really cool shots with the 360 camera. But the Go 3 is also amazing for just getting like really unique shots that I could just never get with any other camera. So let me know, which camera do you use? Which camera are you going to buy? If you've got any questions, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to leave me a like if the video was helpful. Other than that, I hope you have an amazing day and I'll see you very soon in the next video.